It really is nothing like what you see in porn. Well, almost nothing. I did walk into an orgy scene just once, and yes, they did ask me to join, but they were old enough to be my parents and fat enough to legitimately kill me, so I sprinted away from that place as fast as I could without waiting for just a tip. I never delivered pizzas to that neighborhood again. But that was not the strangest thing. Not by a long shot. Apartment 1913. The numbers are ingrained in my memory. I came to hate that door. The first time was pretty frickin' innocuous. Friday night, 8 p.m., one large pepperoni and a 2-liter of Coke. I figured it was a couple who had slowly lost their euphemism for going out at night and had replaced it with the slow creep of apathy for two that's really just a euphemism for death. The guy who opened the door was relatively young and had probably been pretty fit once, 50 pounds and 7 years after the glory days of high school football. However, he was now sharing his Friday night with me. But not just me. Sitting at the table was an anatomically correct sex doll. I hadn't caught him mid-bang. His sweat pants would have been unable to conceal his state if he'd just pulled out. So he clearly had brought the doll to the table as a social occasion. He made no attempt to hide the thing. It was awkward. Then he asked me to come inside and placed the pizza on the table. That was even weirder. I had to delicately avoid the thing's hand as I gingerly placed the pizza on the tabletop. "Careful!" he shouted, pulling the pizza away. He picked up the doll's hand and gently started rubbing it. "That pizza's hot!" He looked deeply into the sex doll's eyes, softly kissed her hand, and walked away to get his money. That left me alone at the table with the clearly used doll. Did I mention that I hate dolls? It turns out that they're even creepier when I know they're getting laid more often than I am. I didn't want to look at her, or it, whatever it is that you might call it, but my eyes were glued to those blue ones. Her mouth locked in a permanent, perfect O seemed to beg conversation. "So," I offered, breaking the ice as he re-entered the room, "that's a pretty doll. Do you collect them?" The man turned around, the drawstring from his pants flailing as he spun. "Doll?" he inquired, smiling blankly. No, but my sister does." He then looked over my shoulder at it. "You should put this on your blog, Charlene." He looked back at me, and his smile grew. "She loves that blog," he explained, setting the money down on the table. I could feel the presence of the doll's pseudo-flesh next to mine, which caused the hair on my own arms to rise. The moment that my hair made contact with the doll's arm, which was just an inch away from the cash, sent a chill down my ass crack, and that was enough for me. The man smiled and waved as I left. The man loved his Friday night pizzas. The following week, I delivered his large cheese and 2-liter of Coke right on time. It really is a lot for just one person, I thought, as I heard footsteps approach the door. When he opened it up, it took me a second to realize what was unusual. It was the sex doll, of course. This time she was leaning on her elbow against the far counter, like she was lounging around to pass the time. The thing is, there's no way he could have propped her up there just before opening the door. I'd heard him walking from the other side of the apartment. Besides, that thing was clearly heavy enough to require a lot of effort for any movement. So, I guess she'd just been standing there, hanging out. He smiled and waved as I left again. I kept delivering to his building. What was I supposed to tell my boss, that I was creeped out by a doll? No, the truth wouldn't do. And it got even weirder on the 5th week. I rang the doorbell as usual, 3,000 calories of sadness in my hands, and heard a scruffling on the other side. It was slow scruffling. It sounded like he was carrying a body bag across the room. When the door finally opened, it just popped inwards a crack. After an awkward silence, I realized that I was expected to enter. I can't say exactly why I was so unnerved at this fact. It was just so unusual to crack the door and expect the guest to invite himself in. But I pressed my hand against the wood and slowly pushed it into the room. The doll was leaning against the wall. She was staring at me. The man was nowhere in sight. I looked anxiously around the room for him. I certainly felt like I was being watched. Where the hell was he? This was just weird. Sick, even. I realized two things at the same time. The first was that it was the doll who was making me feel watched. The second is that with the flush of a toilet, the man established his presence in the bathroom. That room was tucked around a corner and out of sight. I wanted out. I took 3 quick steps to the table and placed the pizza down. Each step further into the place made me feel worse. Like I was going into an unholy shrine. I looked quickly around the table for evidence of money so that I could justifiably bolt out of the place. "Charlene has your cash," the man sang out cheerfully. The fact that he'd known what I was thinking made me want to vomit each of the butterflies that had descended from my stomach down to my balls. I spun around to see Charlene's fingers tightly grasped around some bills. Oh no. I knew that I'd have to touch the pseudo-skin before I could get out of there. The tears were already forming at the corners of my eyes as I reached out and delicately tried to grab the cash without touching the skin. I shouldn't have closed my eyes. The fingertips brushed realistic feeling skin during my blind fumble. I moved around wildly in the search for the money, feeling far more of her than I'd wanted. She was, how should I say, uncomfortably warm. I finally felt the tip of the bills sticking about 2 millimeters out from her fingers. It appeared as though extracting it would be an ordeal, but it slid smoothly from her clutches. I thought that was good news. Until I looked down at my prize and saw that it was shiny with fluid. No wonder it had slid so nicely. The urge to vomit kicked hard, but I barely held it in place. Holding the bills aloft, I ran out of the apartment and swore to myself that I'd never come back. That was last Friday. Today is Friday. I didn't do a delivery route tonight. My boss was pissed when I told him no, because I had never done that before. I didn't care, though. I'd lose my job before I would consent to hanging out with Charlene again. "Fine, jackass," my boss spat back at me. Classy guy, by the way. "But you're closing tonight. By yourself." Considering what I'd been through the past few Fridays, I figured that this wasn't much of a loss. I was content with the idea of spending the evening alone in an empty pizza place. Really, I was. That was before. Before there was only one car in the parking lot. Before I looked out and saw that my car was fucking gone. Before my cell ran out of juice and died much earlier than it normally does. Most importantly, that was before I looked into the 2-passenger car now parked directly in front of the only door in or out of my pizza shop. Because everything changed when I looked into the driver's seat and saw Charlene all alone, staring back at me, mouth open wide, like she was ready for a slice of piping hot, gooey cheese.